Hi everyone, Jane from Pandemonium Art Gallery here, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this beautiful serene cherry blossom scene. This painting is fairly simple. It's probably one of the most simple paintings that I have. I believe that anybody can do this painting, and because it's so simple, you can really experiment with the colors that you use. This is a really limited palette, and you can switch out any of these colors that I use for totally different colors. Make sure that you check out the description below for a full list of materials. So grab your paints and your brushes and let's get started. For this painting, we're going to be using a 1-inch flat brush, the 1/2-inch angle brush, a 1/4-inch angle brush, and a fat, round, natural hair bristle brush. The colors we'll be using are titanium white, Mars black, burnt umber, and primary red. So we're going to start by laying down the background, and we're going to use the 1-inch flat brush. So wet it in your jar and then wipe the excess off. And I want this to have a very slight gray hint, and I'm okay with little streaks of it being darker or lighter because that will help give us an idea of clouds or mist in the sky. So I'm going to start by loading up my white. Remember to get quite a bit of paint on there. We just want to cover this really quick. Most of this background is going to be covered, but we just want a good foundation. So I have quite a bit of white, and I'm just going to grab a little corner of black. If it's not enough, if it's not the gray that I want to see, I'll just add a little bit more. So I'm going to do completely horizontal strokes back and forth, but you could really scatter it and do it any way you like. Don't worry about getting a perfect blend. Just worry about getting the background covered. So I like those little darker spots in there. I don't want them quite that hard. Ooh, that's a bit much black. Just remember that you can add more black if you need, but if you get too much, it can be hard to remove. Right there, I feel like that's too strong. So I'm going to turn my brush on the edge, and that helps to scrape some of it up so that I can move it around a bit more. Remember to press your brush flat to lay paint down and use the end of it to blend colors together. We're going to take this all the way to the very bottom. Okay, now we're going to draw 3 sets of mountains. So the mountains in the background, I'm going to have the top of them be just about at the center, maybe just a little bit higher than the center of the canvas. They're going to be farther away from us, so the color is going to be pretty light, not much darker than this part of the sky here. As the mountains get closer, they're going to be a little bit darker, and the darkness is what helps bring them closer. So if you remember before when we talked about atmospheric perspective, that's kind of what we're building here as well. The pieces in the farthest distance are going to be lighter and less defined, and the ones in the foreground are going to be darker and maybe have a little bit more detail to them. So this time, rather than picking up white and a corner of black, since I do want this to be a little bit more mixed, I'm going to come into my black and just barely grab a hint of it. Bring it over to my white and mix it until I have a gray that I like. You can hold it up to the part of your sky where the top of the mountains are going to be to make sure that it's the right shade. So let's try that and see. I can always darken it if I need to. Let's go just a hint darker. So I'm using the edge of my brush, pushing it flat on here, and kind of wiggling the brush as I go to draw the shape of the mountains. And I'm gonna make a mix up just a little bit darker. I still don't feel like that's dark enough. And I'm gonna fill those mountains in. Try to keep your brush stroke moving the same direction as the mountains, especially if your background is still a little bit wet. You're gonna pick up a little bit of it. And if you didn't mix the colors perfectly on your brush, you'll get some streaks. And I think that those streaks are good because they give your mountains just a little bit more definition. Don't make them look quite so flat. And I'm just gonna, with the edge of my brush, just kind of feather in this bottom line. Now we're gonna mix up a darker color. You want it to be noticeably darker than this color, but not, you don't want it to be a huge jump in color. I think that's probably good. So I'm gonna make sure that this mountain has a completely different shape from that one. So I'm gonna bring it up over here. All right, one more mountain. So I'm gonna get quite a bit of black here. Make this one quite dark. Go over it until you're satisfied with it. This one's a little bit closer than the ones in the back, so I'm gonna give it a little bit more detail, maybe with some darker slashes through it. One more, and I'm just gonna get black this time. I didn't wash off my brush, so I still have some of the gray. I'm just going right into the black. And we'll start this one maybe right about here. And we'll just bring him up pretty high. He's our closest one. And again, I'm going to just define some of these little shadows and highlights that might be in there, but in a really abstract way. I'm not actually trying to, make this look realistic. Just a little more definition. And I'm gonna get quite a bit of white and feather in this base. I almost want it to appear like it's reflecting in water here. Remember, if you're having a hard time getting a blend between two colors, if you've got a streak, just turn your brush onto the chisel edge and drag it across, and that helps pick up some of the paint and spread it around a little more evenly. make this corner pretty light because it's the farthest away from my big mountain. I'm gonna make this corner down here a little darker. We're gonna let this dry, and in a few minutes we'll come back and we will add our cherry blossom branch. Okay, now we're gonna draw the branch, and I'm gonna have it start right about in here and kind of come down like that, and then we'll have other branches that come off of it. Now if you've seen my Midnight Raven video, then you kind of understand what I'm gonna be doing here. It's very similar. So I've got my water and my 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm gonna wet it down and just wipe off a little extra water. Now I'm gonna load my brush with black paint, a good amount of paint, but not real globby. And I'm just gonna sketch out where the branch is gonna go first. So like with my other trees, I'm not worrying about making it nice and wide here and then slowly tapering to a point. I'm just gonna sketch out the main branches and then I can fatten them up. So remember always that the long tip of this brush drags. Since I'm going to be going from here to here, that tip is going to be facing up, not down like that. Just kind of a random organic type shape. Give your brush a little bit of a wiggle as you go, and that helps you get kind of that wood jaggedness. Now I can put more pressure on my brush to get a fatter line. And I'm still kind of wiggling the brush a little as I go. See right there where my paint is really see-through? I just had a little too much water on my brush. So I'm just gonna get some more paint and keep going. Lightening my pressure as I get here so that my branch is tapered and thin. Now you don't have to be too precise with this because we're going to paint over a lot of the branch. And then after we've painted over parts of the branch, we're going to come back and redefine certain parts, and you can make adjustments and changes. So just get a shape that you like. And know that anything can be changed or covered as you go along. I think I'll put another one right about here. All right, now I'm going to move down to the 1/4 inch angle brush, and we're going to do some little detail branches. They're going to be made the exact same way, just on a smaller scale. And you can put them wherever you like. Make sure you spread them out a little bit so that when we start adding the flowers, they're not all tightly clumped together, that they can be nice and spread out naturally. your branches go off of the canvas. It doesn't have to be fully contained. I think that it's more interesting when things cross, so let your branches cross a little here and there and let pieces of it go off of the canvas. For these super teeny thin ends, I'm only just using the tip of the brush, not the full chisel edge. See how that ended with just the last few bristles? Okay, one more time we're gonna let that dry because the next part is we're gonna be laying down the pink for the flowers, and you don't wanna pick up any of this wet black and get that into your flowers. For the cherry blossoms, we're gonna use the natural bristle brush. Now we're gonna do a few layers of colors to add dimension. We want some of the flowers to look like they're deeper up inside the clumps, some of them to look like they're farther on the outside and more exposed to the light. So to make the flowers, we're going to use this primary red as the main color. To darken it for the undertones, we're going to mix it, and we are not going to mix it with black. A lot of new artists think if you want a color to be darker, you mix with black, but that's not true. Black, I mean, if you add it to like blue or purple, you can get a darker color, but it's also going to wash the color out. Black, when you mix it with red, let me show you, you actually get kind of a strange purple color. See, it's not really darker, it's more purple. So you need to know what black is going to do with each color before you do it. For example, if you mix black with yellow, you get green, like an olive green. I'm going to use this brown, the burnt umber, to darken my red, and it's not going to darken it a lot. It's going to give it more of a deeper red tone. If I actually wanted to darken this, I would mix the complementary color in with it, which is green. So different types of greens will do different things to this color depending on its undertone, if it's a warm green or blue green, yellow green. So you can experiment with those and see what you like the best. But for the sake of ease, and because it's what I want to see on here, I'm just going to mix it with the burnt umber. The layer I do on top of that is going to be just the red, and then the next layer is going to be the red with some white, and the next layer will probably be mostly just white. Now this darker layer, I'm going to do more of it, and as my layers get lighter, I'm going to slowly add fewer spots of that lighter color because I always want the previous layer to show. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pull some brown out, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pull some of the red out, and I'm just going to mix them until I have a color that I like. I don't want it to be overly brown, but I want it to be darker, so I kind of like that. So now the paint on my brush is not clumped, it's just on the very end because I kind of wiped my brush through it. And I'm going to start stabbing all over the place. Now I'm not going to make polka dots, like a dot here, a dot there, a dot there. I'm going to slowly make them overlap a little bit. And as they get toward the bottom of the branches, I'm going to make it look almost like they're dripping off. So it'll be wider here and narrower at the bottom. And see, I'm putting a pressure on my brush. It's not just the end of it like that. Not much is happening when I do that. It's kind of stabbing like that, and let the brush kind of fan out and make these fun irregular shapes. And just keep mixing your color as you need. And it can be thick, it can be kind of globby on the canvas. It doesn't have to be thin. You're not wiping. Don't smear the paint here. Just blot it on. And it doesn't even have to be right on your branches. Like over here, my branch is there, but I put some of it out here. So go ahead and put this dark layer all over your tree branches. To cover all of your tree branches, you can leave little parts of them peeking out. Don't worry about going over top of your main branches. I know right now where I'm putting all of this over top of the branches, it's making it appear flat and like the flowers are all between you and the branches. But we are gonna do a lot more to these branches before we're done. So just go ahead and get your base color on there and don't sweat those branches at all. Now I'm going to just wipe off my brush on a paper towel really well. I don't want to get this brush wet. I just want to get off as much of that dark paint as possible. So get it on your paper towel and kind of scrub around in a circle until a lot of it stops coming off. Okay, so my brush is fairly cleaned off and I got me a little bit more of this primary red. Now for this red, I'm going to apply it even heavier. So when I pick up my paint, I'm gonna let it be a little bit more gloppy on my brush. The reason I'm using heavier is notice how transparent this is. This is gonna help me build up those layers and not be able to see through them so much. So I'm gonna do basically the same thing I was doing, but I'm not going to cover all of this. Each brush daub is going to overlap the previous one though, for the most part. But just be aware of your dark color and make sure that it is able to stay in some spots. If you get a little too much somewhere, don't really worry about it. You can tap at it a little bit to get some of it off of there. See, so I'm following the same basic shape, but not fully. I'm not trying to completely mirror it. I'm kind of taking hints from, areas that might already be a little darker and lighter from when I was adding the paint. I might highlight those. I am keeping most of my brighter color to the left. That's just the decision that I've made. I want to make it appear like the light sources may be over here and coming down this way, so I want this side to be a little bit darker. But that doesn't mean there's going to be a hard line between this is the light side, this is the dark side. Notice over here I did put a little blob of the brighter color. And, that's because depending on how the flower is turned, a part of it might be highlighted even though it's in the darker side. So it's just an overall feel that I'm going for. Turn your brush every once in a while after every dot or two, because when you push the brush in the same way over and over, you start to get a repeating shape, like a pattern. And you wouldn't really see that. So what I mean is, if I push it here, and then here, and then here, those three dots essentially look the same. So I'm gonna just turn my brush a little as I go, and that's gonna help break up that pattern a bit. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm looking in this one here to me it feels like it's back, it's deeper. These ones are out closer to the surface, and this one's farther away from me on the other side of the branch. So I'm not going to highlight it a lot. I'm gonna put just a tiny bit, maybe up on that edge, maybe a little there. But other than that, I'm gonna leave that one pretty dark. And you can make those decisions however you want as you go. Get quite a bit of really heavy paint and just highlight more some of these edges that you really want to pop. Especially up here toward where I've decided my light source is. Okay, let's add our next layer, which is going to be starting to add some white. So I'm just gonna grab a bit of white and bring it over into my pink, mix it around until I have a color that I like. Test it out a little bit more. Okay, this next color is gonna be applied in a really controlled way. I'm gonna take a hint from what I did here to my super highlighted areas, and that's where I'm gonna focus this lighter color. So see, just mostly to this outer edge, and I can add almost like little polka dots of color here and there, because that's going to help insinuate the little bits of the flower are poking out farther than some of the other ones. I don't want total polka dots. Keep adding white over here because with this red being wet still, I keep picking up more red. So even though I'm out of red on my plate, I'm getting plenty of red on my brush. If you wanted to wait until that bright red was dry before doing this, you could. I kind of like the way that the colors blend together a bit as I do this. Just remember which ones you decided were inside and don't highlight them as much. Now that I look at it though, this one that I decided was inside, now that I've got some strong highlights, this one seems too transparent. So I'm gonna get a little bit of the pure red and just add it on there. I wiped off quite a bit of that pink and red mixture. I'm just gonna get some. And as this dries, it deepens. So I'm not worried about that being too bright. I think that'll be better. All right, now I'm gonna get just white And add some strong highlights in very small places here and there. And I'm not even doing this on top of all of the red-white mixture that I just did. Too much, you can tap it out with your finger. Here especially, I'm going to put a little bit more. And if you let the paint, each layer of paint dry before the next one, then you have a little bit of a harder time getting the colors to blend in. So with the wet on wet technique like this, if I'm very gentle and tap at the undercolor just the right way, I can get them to blend in enough so that I don't have a hard line between each color. So see how that's kind of got that hard line between the white and the pink there, but if I tap at it just a little, I can push a bit of the pink into the white. If you prefer the really stark contrast in the layers, which some people do, and sometimes I do, then it's okay, you can let each layer dry. Stand back and look at it every once in a while and see if there's any spots that you feel like need some more. And you know, I'm feeling like this just needs a little bit. I don't want to lose it inside of the plant completely, but I definitely want it a little bit darker. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. If you want to go ahead and make some little adjustments here and there, you can do that. And then let it dry, because we're going to finish up the branch and then we are done. Okay, now we're going to add some texture and highlights to the branches, and then we're going to come in here and redefine some of the branches that got lost. So I have my angle brush, and I'm going to come in and grab some of this brown. So in the Midnight Raven video, I did the highlights here with black and white, but I'm going to do it with brown and white. Give it a little bit more of a realistic look. It's a little bit of brown and then just a tiny snap of white. Now, I'm not going to paint over all of this. I'm going to do little slashes of colors. So I'm using the chisel edge and I'm going to give a good amount of pressure so that I get little lines. And I don't have to cover all of the black. Just enough to make it look almost like twisted tree bark. If you get too much white like I did, just grab a little more brown and go over it. I want to keep the majority of the lighter highlights toward the top of the branch. So they're almost like little dashes. The shape that I'm making is about like this. So just those over and over, kind of overlapping. And if you happen to go outside of the black a little bit, that's okay too. Now, when we get to the part where the flowers are over top of the branch, this is where you can decide what is closer. So here, I kind of feel like this branch right here is back farther. This branch is a little bit closer. That's how I see it. If you wanted to see this flower in front, then just leave it the way it is. I don't, so I'm gonna grab some black and I'm gonna paint that branch back in. Just cover that flower up right there. And that's gonna push the flower back. And I can get my brown. And give that branch a little bit of highlight. So I'm gonna pull the camera back a little bit and go through and do that all over throughout the flowers. So I'm gonna start just with some black. And once I've got all of my branches defined the way I want them, then I'll go back in with some brown. You can even come in here in the middle and add in some of those little branches that maybe got hidden a bit. You can even add some that maybe weren't there in the first place. Brush is cleaned off. I'm gonna go back and just add some highlights here and there. I'm not gonna worry about the teeny tiny little branches, mostly just where the branches are fatter is where I'm gonna put some of the highlights, especially deep in here. I think that these branches would have a lot less highlights anyway because they're so deep inside the plant. Everybody, I hope you had a great time painting this serene cherry blossom scene. Please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and check back every week for a new video. If you paint this painting, you can post it to my Facebook page. The link to that is in the description below. It's always really fun to see what you guys do with the videos that I post for you. If there's a particular video that you'd like to see, you can leave me a comment or you can post that on Facebook and I'll see if I can do that for you. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.